So the topic that came to me was pretty natural during the course of this last week. I kicked around a few things, but what popped out for me was the chant that I did with my American Sangha earlier in the week, which is the Kanzeon Sutra or Kanzeon. It's also called the Enmei Jukku Kannon Gyo. I find that very inspirational, in a way to just throw myself wholeheartedly into a practice. But this practice involves sound, and being a musician, I always try to find connections that way. So I recall how chants have had a deep meaning for me as a practitioner for many years, especially coming from this musical background. I'm a drummer and percussionist, but one doesn't need to play a musical instrument to appreciate sound, of course, or music. It just affects us on a primordial level. And I find it a very skillful and profound practice way too. And it has meanings for me that go beyond the intellect. So what about Kanzeon and Kannon? The different names, Guanyin, Avalokitesvara, and I know, I'm sure we know these different names and expressions of mercy, compassion, loving kindness. It's good to recall what the word or the names. I'll just look at Avalokitesvara, which is trickled down from the Chinese Guanyin is trickled down from the Avalokitesvara, and Kannon comes from that. But the original meaning is a sound perceiver, or one who looks down upon sound, or that is perceives the sounds or the cries of sentient beings who need help. So I think I approach the chant as a call to Kannon. For me, recollection of Kannon is a direct route for embodying loving kindness as I'm able. I remember when I was first ordained as a priest, a novice priest, by Zenku Sensei up in Montana. And I came back to my local temple in Oakland. Akiba Roshi, the abbot there, his first words out of his mouth to me were, "Remember the compassion of the Buddha." That's simple. And he said this in English. He doesn't speak English frequently. I mean, he knows many things in English, but he chooses to express freely in Japanese. And so I'm starting to learn Japanese and pick out bits and pieces. And I also have translation help, interpretive help. But the fact that he just said that very clearly in English to me when I came back, that was very profound. So I want to keep honoring that. So Kannon as an embodiment and an archetype of compassion, loving kindness, and perceiving sound. So very fortunate that I have this training both from Akiba Roshi and from my American teacher, because I see them both embodying Kannon, but they do it with humor. They do it with a lightness of being and of matter of factness that I really learn from. That's some of my biggest teachings from them are not spoken. It's just how they carry themselves, how they do their daily life. When I see Akiba Roshi raking the leaves or doing yard work at his home, I see, in a way, I see Kannon doing that. I just see matter of factness and great care at the same time. When Zenku takes care of his family, he has a wife and grown daughters, and just does things with them and for them, and enjoys life with them, and goes sailing with them. He took me out sailing too. He's a very big uh, enthusiast and skilled too. It's just a way of being that's very natural and very wholehearted and not contrived and very loving. They don't hold back. They give themselves completely. So I learned from them, and I learned from my other myriad practitioners who exhibit that too. But I just special shout out to those my teachers there. So the Kanzeon Sutra I saw a Great Mountains translation, which I really love. I really appreciate. And I look at the version that we in the Mokurai, or Silent Thunder Order, Matsuoka's lineage, chant. So I'll be interested to hear how you all do it differently or the same, but I'll just go through some lines. I won't chant them, but I'll speak them. In the English of the Matsuoka lineage, and I think this probably is Suzuki lineage too. Kanzeon prays to Buddha, all are one with Buddha, all awake to Buddha. Buddha Dharma Sangha, eternal, joyous, selfless, pure. Through the day, Kanzeon. Through the night, Kanzeon. This moment arises with mind. This moment itself is mine. Now I love doing the side by side with what I see Great Mountain, and I assume White Plum does. And Kanzeon, at one with Buddha. All beings are one with Buddha. All beings awake to Buddha and to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Joyful, pure, eternal being. Morning heart is Kanzeon. Evening heart is Kanzeon. This very moment arises from heart. This very moment is not separate from heart. I really appreciate that. As we dig deeper in practice, seeing what is, and asking, keep the inquiry open. What is heart mind? And Shin, this is what we inherit, this word or concept, East Asian word Shin or Shin, which is heart mind. I could go down deep with this. I might just try to encapsulate this a bit, if I could. Heart mind as wholehearted. Heart mind means to me that everything I encounter is my life. So no separation. This is what I learned in Zazen. And it's really, you couldn't, if we, sometimes mind gets the connotation of brain. I think in our context of the first translation of Kanzeon Sutra, it does mean heart mind. But I just love that those line up. I mean, very nice and complementary. I'll dig into the sutra a little bit more, but I want to get into the sound, the perception of sound. I'll relate into my practice how that works. As of late, especially, I've found that dropping the busyness of my brain is easier when I can just open myself up to the omnidirectional field of sound. It just gets me, it's a more direct line to get me in a groove of samadhi, concentration. But I don't focus only on this sense perception, but again, it's a direct path for me. But all sense organs are awake, however. So just settling into the posture with a strong feeling in lower abdomen, in tanden or hara. And the mudra for me is really key. While all manner of objects arise and abide and pass, I find this very helpful. Sound has been key for that because, again, of this omnidirectional quality. And it has a quality that just kind of pierces through any kind of duality for me. Again, it may be because I have, the music. I don't think this is just, I wouldn't believe that this is just specific to musicians. I think it has a direct connection into perception, just perception. And what's another word for perception? It'll come back to me. It's there's another good term for that. So I don't know if you can hear, but it's actually calmed down a little bit here. I'm in Oakland, and it is a busy place. It's a vibrant city with vibrant sounds for sure. And you might find you'll probably hear a train coming by at least once. The Amtrak station is just 2 blocks from here, so don't be surprised if you hear a very present sound from Amtrak. And there are dogs. I live in a nice place that has a nice waterfront walk and path, and dogs and their humans. There are boats, and there's the Oakland Airport. So there's a lot to take in, but I do enjoy urban practice. I'm used to it. But when I get out into rural areas, it's very stark, the difference. And I appreciate that too. You really start, for me, I get real acute sounds of the insects and wind. So when I get back to a rural setting for sitting, for practice, I know I'll appreciate that all the more. But they both have both, whether rural or urban, I feel they both have their great benefits. So when doing the Kannon chant, I feel it as manifesting a continual practice, like a continuing thread of practice. Zazen, chanting, walking, meals, talking, working. It's just this thread of practice with wholeheartedness and nothing held back. So I like to just, that's what I think that's what I really keyed in on in the very beginning of my practice, which is learning the posture, and then just when we did chanting services, really just throwing myself into that. I think that really helped me. So that's why I'm enthusiastic about talking on this chant, especially. So I think I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize that not everybody has that faculty of hearing in top form. Some have partial hearing loss, some are profoundly deaf. So, and so much of our practice relies on audible signals in the Zendo setting, especially. So I wanted to do a little investigation on that, and I heard about a practitioner at the San Francisco Zen Center who is now profoundly deaf. He became that way since he became a resident there at the city center in San Francisco. And his name is Cato Keith Baker, and I find his take on it very fascinating. His experience is very illuminating to me as a hearing person. How a practice that relies on things that I take for granted can be out of reach, not perceived. So adaptations can and are being made for this, which includes American Sign Language, in this case here in at San Francisco, closed captioning, and that kind of thing, depending on the situation. But I really want to read more up on that because I've found him to have a very, very open and instructive attitude on the loss of his own hearing and how to navigate practice with people with hearing. So I'd recommend reading, finding what you can on Keith Baker, Reverend Keith Baker. So that brings me to a little bit of hearing as an aggregate, not just one kind of perception. I've heard phrases such as hearing with the eyes and seeing with the ears, which suggests kind of a morphing of sense perception. And that can happen when you get into deep states of concentration. But I'd like to hear what Reverend Baker has to say on these things. It fascinates me. So, as I've said that my ordination teachers embody a lightness and a humor and a devotion in their practice of compassion. I recall Dogen Zenji's phrase, playing freely in samadhi. For me, that has meant a faith in the practice and the disciplines with a natural, unforced expression of Buddha's way. Um, for example, just I find myself when I really get a good groove going in very consistent zazen practice, it just manifests out where I am, wherever I am. I take public transportation. I'll read on public transportation, but sometimes I'll just sit. I mean, it just kind of naturally, my mudra just kind of forms, and it just kind of, without being demonstrative about it, just very easy, and just very settling. So it depends on the situation, but I find myself uh, unexpectedly seeing some manifestations of zazen in other settings. But in musical terms, I thought of John Coltrane, the famous saxophonist, legendary jazz saxophonist, who was very disciplined in his practice, musical practice. He practiced scales, he practiced modes, experimented with different organizations of scales, and he was insatiable in terms of a study. And he also mastered more traditional blues and jazz, but he can also express himself with works like A Love Supreme, Ascension. These are what are called out there jazz. I mean, they're just very expressive. What one might think is unstructured, but if the more I practice, the more I train myself musically, I hear this, what sounds unstructured as a deep discipline and a deep expression of playing freely in samadhi. So he was able to just live with his horns, basically. And then when it came time to hit the stage, he just played. It just came out. Nothing held back. So I understand zazen practice as playing freely in samadhi. Zazen practice as not only on the cushion, it just extends and manifests in daily life. So I'm trying to keep this around sound and kannon. So I'm going to just go through a couple of lines again. How am I doing the time? I think I might be running over, but I'll just say.
Yeah, if you have maybe like 5 more minutes or so, or are you finished?
Sounds good. Yeah, I can wrap it up in a couple of minutes. Thank you, Mui.
Okay.
Um, so Kanzeon, at one with Buddha. In the translation, I see Kanzeon with exclamation. That's setting a strong intention to invoke. All beings are one with Buddha. All beings awake to Buddha. Again, exclamation. That's an affirmation that we don't exist separately. And to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the three treasures, joyful, pure, eternal being. Eternal being. I like, and joyful and pure. Just this, suchness is joyful and pure and the eternal present. Morning heart is Kanzeon, recalling Kanzeon as intention of the day. Evening heart is Kanzeon, recalling Kanzeon in my own practice of kindness to others during the day. This very moment arises from heart. This very moment is not separate from heart. Again, all that I encounter is self or my life too. No separation. So I'll leave it there, except to bring up one. There is a bring up. I don't think I won't share the screen, but I'll mention a Zenga, a Zen brush work by Hakuin Zenji that really, really just took me. And it's entitled Always Remember Kannon. I'll just briefly describe it if you haven't seen it. It's very vertical, very vibrant brushing, and as you would probably expect from Hakuin. There's a long line in between two elements, and I see Kannon, I see a massive compassion reaching out to a suffering being in that. So you can find that online. Again, it's Hakuin's Always Remember Kannon. So anyway, thank you again for listening, and great to meet you all.